Now let's learn how to work with the Polyline tool. To get started, what I'd like you to do is come over here to the navigation palette and go ahead and make the pool the active layer. That way, because we have the Show Snap Others layer option on, that way we will only be manipulating objects that are on the pool layer. So the Polyline tool is located over here in the basic tool set, and it looks like this, the Polyline tool. The shortcut for it is the 5 key. And once I click on the Polyline tool, I have various different modes. So for this first one, I'm going to begin tracing this area that's probably a retaining wall right here. So the first one is the corner vertex mode, and what that means is it's just a straight continuous line. So each click will end one leg of our wall over here. And if you want to get really precise, there's another shortcut for zooming in wherever it is that your cursor is, and that is just to hit the Z key on the keyboard, and it just brings you really close in, and that way you can be fairly detailed about where it is that you are clicking. It's one of the more accurate ways to work. And I will go ahead and just end my line right there. To end that line, I did a double click object, and because it was in the zoom in mode of it, it gave me this crazy line here at the end. I can clean that up by using the Reshape tool, which is also located in the basic tool set. So I'll just click the Reshape tool, and then in this instance, I just want to delete the vertex. So I will click that last vertex, and then it'll clean that up for me. So going back to the Polyline tool, the next mode is the Bezier vertex mode. What I have found is that working with curves can be a challenge until you get used to how the tools work. And so what I think happens is that most people will pick one mode to draw a curve, and then that's their favorite, and they always defer to that one unless it just won't give them the results that they need, and then they start playing around with some of the other modes. So for me, I feel most confident with the Bezier vertex mode. So I'm going to use this one to actually trace the pool. And what I like to do is I like to pick kind of the longest, straightest area for my first click. And then what I do is that for each curve, I want to overshoot that curve by a little bit, because as I continue to move the cursor, it bends that curve. And so I've gotten pretty good at being able to estimate where those curves are going to be. And I also work kind of sloppy. You don't need to worry about getting it perfect, because we're going to come and clean it up in just a second. And then at the end of it, I'm just going to click, and I'm not even exactly on that line where I started from. So I'm just going to click twice. And let me go back because I need to click it in pretty quick succession. So I click twice, and then there's a gap in my shape. Now, having closed shapes in Vectorworks can be really important because sometimes we make other objects out of closed shape. So if I haven't closed my shape, like I've done here, I can always come over to the Object Info palette and click on Close, and it connects those two lines so it is a closed shape. So now I have a pretty rough shape. It's not exact, and so now I'm going to clean it up, and we're going to use the Reshape tool again. So up here in the basic tool set, we have the Reshape tool. The shortcut is the dash key. So I'm just going to click on that. And then I have various different modes up here. So this first mode, the Move by Polygon Handles mode, is going to be the most useful in helping us clean this drawing up. But there are a few other things that I'd like to clean up first before we actually start with the major cleanup. If I scroll in here, where I had the computer close that shape for me, you can see it just has a couple extra vertices that the rest of the shape doesn't have. And what I have found is that when you are drawing curves, you want to use the least amount of vertices possible in order to come up with the most pleasing curves. Otherwise, they can be kind of jagged and kind of lumpy. So the fewer vertices, the easier it is to work with. So we're going to come in here and we're going to clean this up, and we're going to use that same delete vertice mode that we looked at earlier. I'm just going to click in there, and now that looks fine. So I'm done with that. Then next up, we're going to go back to that Move Polygon Handles mode that we were looking at before. And what that does is it just moves any of these handles that you click. And you may notice that the handles are placed in two different positions on this shape. There are handles that go through the middle of the line, and there are handles that go to the outside of the line. You can move either of those handles, And what happens when you move them is that they move their neighbors, essentially. And so what I have found the easiest thing to do is actually to move these handles that are outside of the line and try to leave the handles that are on the line alone. You can still click them if moving these exterior handles doesn't quite give you the shape that you're after, but get started with these exterior handles, and that's usually an easier way to work. And so I will just go through the file and I will just sort of budge these around. You may have to take a couple laps in order to get a really good shape. And in fact, one thing that I'm looking at is that I've got these two handles very close to each other and then this one very far away. And so to get the most accurate shape, I think I'm going to need to move that vertex, and then that's going to allow this handle that, and I'm using the terms vertex and handle pretty interchangeably. So I'm going to click that one, and now that looks good. So spacing can be important. If it's too tightly spaced, it's going to be a little bit of an issue. And you can see I just kind of go back and forth between them until I get a better placement. And then on this one, I may have to come and actually bring that line, move the handle. I may need to move the handle where the vertex is actually running through. But then I just go and I clean that up a little bit. Same with that. And you can see sometimes it's just a little bit of a matter of fudging them back and forth. That's not as perfect as I would like, but hey, it's passable. Let's go ahead and just go with it. I've got these other lines that are off by quite a bit, so maybe if I come and I clean up some of those, it'll make a difference over there. So this is just basically how I work with that Bezier vertex mode. Keep trying to perfect this a little bit. You can see, like, depending on the distance between its neighbors, it totally changes the shape, so play around with that a little bit. And in some cases, it's the vertex that's through the handle that needs to be moved a little bit in order to get a good shape. So there you go. That's a decent shape. That's passable. Next up, I want to come over here to the attributes palette and just give it a nice watercolor, and then I'm going to take the outline away. So there's my pool. Looks pretty nice. In order to show you some of the other modes for the Polyline tool, I'm going to go ahead and trace some of the other shapes that are in the drawing. This next mode is the cubic vertex mode. So let's go ahead and do this island right here. This contains a couple of boulders and a planting inside of it. So let's go ahead and trace out this shape. Now, the way that this cubic vertex mode works is that every click that you make should be on the line that you are tracing. So there's no overshooting the curve the way that we did with the Bezier vertex mode. So we're just going to make a series of clicks. This one can be a little bit easier to get used to. And I'm using more vertices in this mode. But it's going to give us a good shape. Okay. So now what I can do is, as I get close to the beginning of my line, there's another shortcut. And if I press the K key, it automatically closes that shape. So if you come over here in the Object Info palette, it doesn't say that it's closed over here. So I would go ahead, just to be safe, I would check that closed option over here. But the K key essentially closed my shape for me. And now that looks really good. So what I can do is just do a little bit of fine tuning with the reshape tool. There it is. And maybe down here, I'd like to clean that up a little bit better. That one's a little bit high. So you can see how that one works. So these first three modes, for the Polyline tool, are the most important modes. They're the most user-friendly, and they get used the most often. So the corner vertex mode, the Bezier vertex mode, and the cubic vertex mode, these are the three that I recommend that you play around with the most. If you're feeling adventurous, go ahead and play around with these other three options as well.